Okay, good afternoon. I'm Priyanka, and on behalf of Manupatra, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all the attendees and our guests, Anurag Bana and Rupa Doraswamy. The webinar today on the topic of technical competence becomes even more pertinent and relatable given the situation where the pandemic has accelerated the need to adopt technology and it is ending up being all pervasive. At the same time, emerging technologies are making an impact at different levels. Our speaker today, Anurag Bana, who is an influencer and thought leader in the emerging areas of disruptive innovation, Internet of Things, digital assets, amongst others, is thus the right choice to bring to the fore the need for technological competence. Some of what we hear today may sound radical, but we cannot deny the fact that it is a matter of time that legal profession in India will need to catch up. Our moderator for today, Rupa Doraswamy, a little about her. So Rupa is an NLS Bangalore alumnus, 26 years of being a lawyer. Today, she's more inclined towards technology than law. Her tryst with law goes back to 1996 when she was writing code as a lawyer in the US. No surprises that having dabbled with law as part of the largest IT corporate principal lawyer at the helm of a law firm, she launched her dream project, Lawsham, which is a law practice incubator and a technology-driven international B2B platform for independent lawyers. So now, without much ado, I will request Rupa to take this forward.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. Hello, everybody, and thanks, Manupatra, for doing this project here. This is such an important subject. In fact, we tried to do some of these sessions, and we realized that nobody wants to talk about professional ethics anymore. And this is really, the time is really right for us to be talking not only about professional ethics and about how technology plays such an important role in a lawyer's life. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker of the day, Mr. Anurag Bana. Anurag has over 16 years of experience as an international lawyer and a policy advisor. He has worked across jurisdictions and also has a degree from, he's an Indian qualified lawyer with a BCL from the University of Oxford. Anurag started his legal career as a judicial clerk with the Supreme Court of India judge, and then interned at various organizations international, including UNCITRAL, Secretariat at Vienna, and the Permanent Bureau of the Hague Conference at The Hague. He is licensed to practice law in India, and he has worked briefly in the corporate sector at the Czech Republic. With such a wonderful and varied experience, who better could talk about this wonderful subject than Anurag? So the way we're going to do this is we're going to have a presentation by Anurag for the first 20 to 25 minutes. He has slides, and we have received questions from some of you in advance. So we're going to hope to, maybe some of those questions will be answered during the slide. And after that, we will have Q&A, which I will moderate. So please feel free to put your questions on in the Q&A box, and we will take them soon after the presentation by Anurag. And over to you, Anurag.
Thank you, Rupa, for a very kind introduction. And I would also like to thank Manupatra for organizing this webinar on this very interesting and an important topic. So thank you to Priyanka and her team. So hello, everyone. I guess before taking any more time, I would probably just start with the presentation so that we have enough time for the question and answers after that. And so let us start. I will just share my screen with you.
Yeah, it's showing.
It's showing, perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
So this is the topic, as you can see on the slide. First slide is technical competency as duty of care for clients, a legal perspective. I will start with the presentation now. What I intend to cover on this on these slides are that just to give a brief overview of what is competence, what is technological competence, perspectives from the global legal regulators and organizations, which is basically the bar councils and the bar associations around the world, and then covering up on the upcoming legal tech areas, because this is something which is really growing across the board in different jurisdictions, where there are new models coming up, and there's a lot of discussion on AI-based solutions and the IoT. And then in the end, there will be basically an outline on the top five considerations for lawyers as duty of care for clients. And these five areas, I would say, or five spheres, are something that we at our end, at the International Bar Association, have managed to identify and jotted down after a mapping study that we've done. So starting on with the first slide, which is on competence, we've here defined what is competence, because this is a terminology where many people tend to have different definitions. But here we've outlined the definition of competence, which is your aptitude, your skill, and the ability to perform a specific legal activity or a task when rendering professional legal service. And this is the core that forms the ability for a lawyer to perform their legal service. Competence in legal services includes the application of diligence, learning and skill, mental and physical ability. It also includes emotional ability, actually, now, that is reasonably necessary for the performance of such service. It also includes reflection on experiences and identification of the need for further competency development. The practice of law has evolved significantly over the last decade, as we've all if all of us in legal practice have definitely noticed the change. And this is happening across the world in different areas, in different sectors, in different substantive areas of law. And one of the main reasons for this is the fact that there is this disruption happening in the legal sector. There is disruption on the legal delivery of services model. And I think that is where there is a real need for the lawyers and the legal professionals in legal practice to be able to be a part of this change and be able to embrace this change and make the change. Now, disruptive innovation is, again, as I said, it's the changing of the models of delivery of legal services. And this is based on three things. One is more for less challenge. Now, the more for less challenge is that in today's day and age, we have clients who are demanding more. They're demanding more efficient services for less fees, less money. So there's that challenge that is driving this as a disruptive innovation. Then it is the information technology, the growth of information technology. And I'm saying this because there is a growth in what we've been facing on big data, artificial intelligence. I mean, this is creating a significant change on the efficiency in the profession. So there is a lot of work happening on the IT models being developed, solutions being developed, and this is definitely an area that is disrupting the legal services profession. And third is, of course, the gradual liberalization. I mean, liberalization is of, when I say the liberalization, it is more of the profession, how it is being impacted by technology. And technology is providing the alternative legal services model also. So there is the liberalization taking place on that front also, not only from a regulatory perspective, but also from the delivery of services perspective. Now, after we've defined what is competency, we come to the slide on technological competence. As we said, that with the increased use of technology in legal practice, there is an underlying contractual and an ethical duty for lawyers to understand technology and its use and application, and then to adequately process that information, protect that information when rendering legal services for the client. And this is very important because this is where the duty of a lawyer comes in, for being competent, but also being technologically competent with the onset of technology affecting the legal service. Now, the American Bar Association, in fact, started about I would say 2 decades ago, about 20 years ago, when they started looking into this issue, where they set up a special dedicated commission on ethics called the Commission on Ethics 2020. And the chief reporter there, Mr. Andrew Perlman, said, a competent lawyer's skill set needs to evolve along with technology itself. And this was the basis for their work and the research that they did for their members of the American Bar Association. Now, competent representation of a client requires broad knowledge of technology issues that may affect the client and the client's matter. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, it is about generating that, enhancing and generating the duty of care, because it is the fiduciary relationship of the lawyer with the client. And as a duty, as a fiduciary duty of the lawyer, it is very important to be able to be technologically competent so that you are able to represent the client's interest in the best possible manner. So therefore, in the end of this slide, you can see the indicators that legal principles that we are taught when we are qualifying as a lawyer. Then the ethical duties are also associated, because that they very closely follow and go hand in hand with the legal principles. So legal principles, ethical duties, and the understanding of the state of technology, especially legal technology. All these three parts form the core value of the definition of technological competence. So this is how we define what a technological competency is. And this is where it all comes from. That's where the core part is the duty of care that a lawyer has to provide in terms of the representation for the client. Going on to the next slide, I will give you an outline, basically a background on a very recent development that has taken place at the International Bar Association, where last year we made a revision, an amendment to the International Bar Association's international principles on conduct for the legal profession. We've had these principles for about 10 years now, but what the amendment that we made, which was approved by the IBA Council unanimously, was that we included a paragraph in the principles where, and let me tell you, the International Bar Association has a membership of about 195 to 198 bar associations around the world. So we are a membership body, representation body of all the bar associations, bar councils, and then in addition to the lawyers, law firms, and in-house counsels and academics also. So here we included what is an interesting statement in the paragraph, which is that lawyers should also take care to ensure that confidentiality and professional secrecy are maintained in respect of electronic communications and data stored on computers. Standards are evolving in this sphere as technology itself evolves. And lawyers are under a duty to keep themselves informed of the required professional standards so as to maintain their professional obligations. This is something I think which is very important, because the fact that we did a lot of research, Bar Issues Commission of the International Bar Association worked on amending this document. And this was the most, I would say, the most apt way of including how technology is now affecting the legal profession. We also, this was a part of the confidentiality and secrecy section in the principles, but we also have a section on competence where we've included very, I would say, specifically more on the practice management tools and the practice management system. So here also in the explanatory note on competence under section 9, we've involved that competence is founded on both ethical and legal principles, and it involves adequate knowledge of the practice and procedures, and also includes competent and effective client, file, and practice management strategies. So this change happened last year in 2019, and this was obviously inspired by a change that happened at the American Bar Association a couple of years ago, where the ABA drafted a model rules of professional conduct, and they included this provision of technological competence. If you see here in this slide, there's a definition of competence which has been provided by the ABA under the client-lawyer relationship. And it states that a lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client. Competent representation requires legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation reasonably necessary for the presentation. In 2012, the Commission on Ethics reviewed the model rules in the context of technology and global legal practice, and they included this comment on comment 8, which is referring to the maintaining competence part. And here, if you see, it says, to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill, a lawyer should keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice, including the benefits and risks associated with the relevant technology, engage in continuing study, very important, and education, and comply with all continuing legal education requirements which the lawyer is subject. As of July 2020, there are 38 states in the United States of America that have actually adopted the duty of technological competence and have made this mandatory for the members of their respective bars. Going to the next slide, there was a similar change that happened just last year in Canada. And we were in touch with the Canadian Federation of Law Societies, and they had informed the IBA that this was a change that they were making. And this happened in October, and we then got information in December about this change. And if you see here, again, very similar to what the ABA has referred to in terms of defining competence. There is an inclusion in the commentary as 4A, which refers to maintain the required level of competence. A lawyer should develop an understanding of an ability to use technology relevant to the nature and area of lawyers' practice and responsibilities. A lawyer should understand the benefits and risks associated with the relevant technology, recognizing the lawyer's duty to protect confidential information set out in their section 3.3. What was interesting is the point in 4B, where they included that the required level of technological competence will depend on whether the use or understanding of technology is necessary to the nature and area of lawyers' practice and responsibilities, and whether the relevant technology is reasonably available to the lawyer. In determining whether technology is reasonably available, consideration should be given to the factors including the lawyers or the law firm's practice areas, the geographic locations of the lawyers or firm's practice, and the requirements of the clients. So interesting part is they have included the word reasonably available, because there is that perception where the moment technology word comes in, there is a cost factor that comes in your mind that, oh my God, there's a cost associated with this. But here it is, taking care of that concern and saying that whatever is reasonably available, you have to make sure that that is available for, take care of the requirements of the clients. And I've also included one image of from the code of conduct on competence, which I thought was very interesting because the way they've defined a competent lawyer is probably the most elaborate form of definition that we've come across in terms of, in mapping out different jurisdictions. You can see that they have included legal research, analysis, application of law to the relevant factors, writing, drafting, negotiation, everything including that is needed for a competent lawyer. So I've just included that as just to define that there is the definition of competent law very well given, very well defined in the codes of conduct. Now we at the IBA Legal Policy and Research Unit based in the London office, we did a survey in late 2018, and this was on trying to identify the question on technological competence from different member bar associations to understand whether they had this in their respective bars or whether they were planning to include technology compliant requirements or part in their ethical codes. And we got about, I would say about 25 to 30 responses from the main jurisdictions. And given some information on the jurisdictions that responded. In the UK, we had England and Wales, where there is no a technological competency requirement as yet expressly mentioned in either in the Bar Standards Board handbook, that's for the barristers, or in the Solicitors Regulatory Authority handbook. But there is reference that is being made, and there are lots of training programs that are being conducted for the barristers as well as the solicitors. And in fact, the Bar Council of England, in our response to the survey, said that there is not specifically, they've not set it out in their codes of conduct, but there is an increasing digitization of the court system, which requires barristers to keep up to date with the technological developments. So they do recognize the fact that this is something, and I think it's just a matter of time that they will include that in their handbooks as a requirement. And moreover, with the current context that we are in, this will only accelerate the whole process because of the COVID-19 pandemic that all the jurisdictions are facing, more from a legal services, professional services perspective, I would say. Similarly, the Law Society of England and Wales, they also are conducting several awareness programs for their solicitors, and I'm sure it's just a matter of time that they will be including that in their respective codes of conduct. These are some of the bars that we mentioned that responded to our survey, and the bars that are actually exploring this as as a section within their codes of conduct, and probably it's a matter of time, as I said, that they will be including technology as a competency requirement. So you can see the Dutch bar, the Japanese, Russian, New Zealand, Scotland, Hong Kong. Interestingly, we have other bar associations also who have expressed an interest in exploring this area. Now, I've mentioned the Bar Council of India rules and the Advocates Act because I think there is a real need for for all the advocates in India. There is a real need of the hour to define competency, even tech competency, and initiate necessary consultations for amendments to the Act, because the enactment does not specifically refer to any form of even defining what is a competent lawyer. There's no definition either in the Act or in the rules, the Bar Council rules. And I think this is high time where there can be some form of collaboration in terms of understanding this area and making the change happen. Now, coming to the question on legal tech areas. Now, as you may have, I don't know if you're following, but there's a lot of information every day almost in the news about how there are new legal tech areas that are securing a lot of investment. There's a lot of investment happening. There's a lot of collaboration happening in the legal tech. So here I've said the financial investments being made in legal tech for developing new innovative models of legal services to solve client challenges. And these are based on efficiency, accessibility, and affordability. I think these are the three main areas where technology is really, I would say, optimizing the legal services delivery part. Emerging technologies are enabling next generation of data management capabilities in companies. Companies are looking at it. There's a lot of data strategies being built. There's a lot of defensive and offensive data. These are referring to data management. Defensive is more for compliance related data for a company, and offensive is more for competitive related data. If you're investing in or having there's a joint venture happening, so there's more that kind of data also being optimized for those purposes. So data architectures are being built for business specific transformation of data. SSOT and MVOT are basically technical terms. The SSOT means single source of truth, and MVOT means multiple versions of truth. These are all, if you are computer, this is a language which is used mostly for data management perspectives and technical part. But just I've included this because this is where the data strategies are being formulated. Similarly, there's a lot of, as I said, growth of integrative, deep, and broad multidisciplinary domain practice. But that's where the multidisciplinary part of legal practice comes in. And that can be alternative legal services, that can be multiple legal services, debatable topic, but there's a lot happening because that's where the technology is disrupting the profession and the services model. Given some examples of AI-based tools that analyze and transform data. They refine data, raw data, unstructured data, structured data, and work on the legal documents. Some of them I've included, as Manu Patra is obviously doing a lot in terms of the AI-powered research and analytics. Similarly, there is Kira for due diligence in M&A, mergers and acquisitions. Legal Zoom is doing for drafting legal documents. Legal Geeks is there for contract reviewing of contracted costs. This may be for liquidated damages, ascertaining liquidated damages from tons and tons of documents that you come for EPC contracts or the FIDIC contracts. Similarly, Extero, DocuSign, Lex Machina. I mean, these are all different areas that have developed in the legal sector. DocuSign for e-signatures and digital identity. Lex Machina for prediction of case rulings. I mean, this is all happening. This is the, I won't say even the future. This is the present, which is actually moving on very quickly, very fast into the future. Tech incubators is something which is a growing concept. In India, we have Prarambh by Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas, which is a first in India. Very interesting incubation hub. They have set it up. In the UK and in the US, the big law firms, the Magic Circle firms, have set up their own incubation centers, incubation hubs. Advanced Delivery, fused by Allen & Overy. They've been coming out with new products, new legal services, more from a client solution-oriented perspective. And then we have Create 65 plus 65 by Clifford Chance. Here, coming to this slide, I've just given a very brief outline on introduction on the new tech terminologies that are coming in. You may have heard of blockchain technology, you may have heard of smart contracts. So these are all terminologies that are actually automating the services part also. Interesting here is the part on payments, where I don't know if how many of you are aware, but there are law firms across the board in different parts that they have started taking their fees in crypto assets, in cryptocurrencies. And the problem is that because the regulators are not, there's no regulation on or clarity on what this is. So it is also not illegal as such. But there have been many guidelines coming out from the FATF or from the Commonwealth Secretariat on the virtual currencies part for business and for professional services and products also. So I've listed some of the links here, and you can see that there's some reference I've made in the end about the private international law. This is about the Hague Conference on Private International Law. They have come out with a fantastic guide on good practices on how to use technology to collect evidence in a cross-border litigation or non-litigation matters in civil and commercial matters. So it's a very good, I would say, guide which was released this year, very recently, just a few months ago. And we also, from our end, provided some inputs to the document. Coming to the IoT, as many of you must be familiar with this, the Internet of Things, it is the capability of connected devices to connect other devices and communicate data through the internet infrastructure that the IoT devices can sense, connect, and react. There was an interesting situation in the United States where the property real estate lawyers were facing, and the National Association of Realtors, the real estate property lawyers, they found out that only 15% of clients asked about whether their homes contain smart appliances and IoT devices. And many were unfamiliar. And that's not only the sellers or the buyers, but even the lawyers were not familiar that there are these smart homes now that have come up. And this is clear transfer of property area. But there are these smart homes, immovable assets, immovable property, can be movable property also. But the fact that there is the IoT connection where it's collecting data, it's refining data, it's transforming data, it is optimizing on that data continuously. There are privacy implications, there are confidentiality implications. And tomorrow, if there is a sale, purchase, seller and the buyer, there can be issues of custody, there can be issues of property challenges, title challenges, and who. So this was an issue that happened, and they have worked on a guide for their jurisdiction on lawyers, what they should keep in mind when they are in this whole process of sale and purchase of property. I just included this because I thought this was an interesting um, way they found that how technology is actually disrupting this form of the legal service. Now coming to, I would say, the main last of my slides referring to the areas, which I said in the beginning, we identified when we did a mapping study on how we can say that technological competence can be covered in what main areas. So here we've identified 5 main areas where, as a lawyer, you should make an effort. You should make an effort to understand what these areas are and how this technology is making an impact on your work. One is, of course, first one, the data security. Cyber security is a very important aspect. The International Bar Association also came out last year with the IBA guidelines on cybersecurity for lawyers, because there is an issue of privilege and confidentiality that is a very important part of this fiduciary trust and the fiduciary relationship between the lawyer and the client. So cybersecurity is very important. Second is e-discovery. Now, e-discovery is a concept which in India is still at a very, I would say, early stage, because I think there are service providers providing this service, but it's not in the main. There's no endorsement, or there's no mainframe adaptation on this, or adoption on this front. But in the US, this is something which is being very actively worked for pre-trial investigations, and both parties, whether for dispute resolution or for other dispute related issues, they look at electronically stored information as digital evidence for litigation and non-litigation also. So e-discovery is an area which is a really growing area for tech competency. Third is technology being used to run your legal practice. Now, this is something where I've mentioned about the legal tech platforms and the payment structures, and what kind of technology you are using in your day-to-day work for delivering the service, for providing that legal service. So this is very important. You have to make an effort to understand what kind of technology is being used. Similarly, there is technology being relevant to the client's work. Again, as a part of your fiduciary duty and duty of care to your clients, you have to make sure that you are aware of the commercial business or even the technology that is being used by the client, which is very important. This is what we found, that in many other jurisdictions, this is something which the lawyers have to make sure that they are able to keep a track of this. This is an important part of your competency. And fifth and last is technology being used in the courtroom, which, as all of us have been seeing, there are lots of virtual courts that have started. There is video conferencing that we are involved with on a day-to-day basis. And we are also doing, the ones who are doing legal practice, are working on e-filing, understanding how do you file, how do you do e-filing, the e-courts system, practice system, and understanding that. So the technology that is being used in the courtroom is very important for a lawyer to understand and make that effort, because this forms a part of your technological competence. I would say these 5 areas are what we've identified as data security, e-discovery, technology being used to run your legal practice, technology relevant to clients' work, and technology used in the courtroom. Coming to my last slide is just basically, I would say, summarizing on what I think is important that we have to keep in mind for technology as a competence. And it is that the practice of law is evolving. There is no doubt about that. It has been evolving. It has evolved quite a lot in the last decade or so. Now, legal regulators have to be responsive to this evolution. Tech-based legal knowledge and legal training is becoming, I would say, it's not will become, but actually is becoming a smart, fine-tuned skill in many jurisdictions. I mean, you see Singapore, you see, this is an area where there is a lot of interest in, even from work-wise, from investment-wise, and even from the client's perspective. You have to be different. You have to be on top of it. You have to be ahead of the curve. And that's why one important aspect here is legal professional rules of conduct should assist lawyers in providing legal services in a way that ensures public interest is protected. And what is needed is a sustainable framework based on legal, ethical, and technical principles. And I feel this is a moment where all the legal regulators should be aware, make themselves aware of this, have consultations, include the legal profession, the members, different components of the legal profession. We are open from our end at the IBA to be able to be part of those consultations and in fact provide that level of knowledge and the outreach also in order to understand what these areas are and how you can include this as a form of competence in your respective codes of conduct and make your lawyers more, make them more competent for the future. So this is my last slide, and in the end, I'm just, I'll circulate the slides to you, but in the end, it is just my information on where we here at the Legal Policy and Research Unit, based in the International Bar Association's head office. Feel free to contact me if there is anything that you would like, or any information. We've been collecting a lot of information on this, and we have been disseminating it also via webinars and also via publications. So this is just the contact information for me, and I think we can perhaps go ahead with the questions after this. Let me.
Thank you, Anurag. That was just taken us to another level, taking us completely international. Now, I'd like to bring you down a little bit, back to India. Help us here. Help us here. I've been looking at the Bar Council of India Rules, Advocates Act, done some research on this since we started talking. And I don't even know where to begin. We've looked at some case laws. You're talking about legal tech. You're talking about crypto payments. Being a practicing lawyer, at least so far, thus far, I'm a little lost here. Help me understand how all of this is going to happen in India, considering that we are heavily regulated here. I have senior advocates who don't even want to be on WhatsApp groups because they think that affects the duty against advertising and solicitation. So that's what we're dealing with right now. From that to and pretty much, as you know, practice of law includes not just going to court, but also there's case laws after the law firms, the US law firms try to enter India, and there's enough case law to establish that it goes beyond the courtroom. So you're talking about corporate lawyers, you're talking about advisors giving advice in law. They're all covered by they're all practicing law, and only advocates are allowed to practice law in India. And thereby, they're governed by the Bar Council of India rules, which is extremely stringent and archaic. Help us out. Help us unravel this, please. And then I'm going to ask you a few more questions after this.
I agree, Rupa. I think this is, I think change has to come in. I mean, see, the thing is, we cannot keep ourselves, I won't even say isolated, but we cannot keep ourselves secluded, that if, in the presentation, I said I listed some of the bar associations from different jurisdictions. I mean, countries like in Latin America, we have Brazil, we have Colombia, even in the African region, I mean, they are open to change. They're open to understanding what these changes are. And I understand, we are heavily regulated, no doubt. There's a regulation which is there where you cannot do certain things, but technology is as it is outpacing everything. It is what we are. Instead of playing catch up, we should at least we should be open to ideas where we have at least a consultation, get all the entities, stakeholders together, have a form of a dialogue, a discussion, understand what these areas are. And then if one comes up to a decision on whether to go ahead or not, or whether to make any change or not, whether to understand what a regulated practice is and what a non unregulated practice is something which would obviously depend on how it pans out, because there is that continuous challenge. But I think this is the need of the hour, where there has to be changes. I mean, I was looking at the Bar Council of India rules, and it is very interesting that under Section 7 of the Advocates Act, 1961, they refer to the functions of the Bar Council of India. And in that function, they very clearly elaborate on what the role of the Bar Council is in terms of understanding legal education, and how they can help the members of the legal profession be made more, I would say, qualified in terms of providing the legal service. So they refer to, in 7A, Section 7A, they even refer to the fact that the Bar Council of India can be involved in seminars. They can, for continuing legal education. I won't say continuing, for education, I would say, seminars, conferences, and they even, in fact, refer to the International Bar Association. So there is, in the statute, the IBA has already the name established under Section 7A, that the Bar Council, has the option. They have the option to. It's just about making that effort and to open up the thought process.
Correct. Yeah. So maybe some specific questions from our audience, if I may. Yeah. So one of the questions is, does a lawyer need to know about digital marketing?
Yes, I think this is a good question, because I was just reading something that I think there is a petition in the Supreme Court that probably has come up very recently, where I think digital, there is the petitioner has raised this concern that the lawyers, at least during this pandemic stage, lawyers should be allowed to at least, I won't say advertise, but have that freedom to do something which is non-legal related, or even, make themselves more visible via the different platforms available. So here, I think what is happening today's day and age is the social media platforms. There are so many social media platforms that have come up. So even if you are not, providing your, advertising your own services, but in a way you do subconsciously and to tend to, if you have a profile on LinkedIn, you do tend to make yourself more visible, not only in your local jurisdiction, but across the board, across the globe. So you have to know. I mean, as a lawyer, you do have to know what is digital advertising, digital marketing, and how is it perceived, because it would depend on jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In the United States, there is hardly any restriction. Even in the United Kingdom, there is not much restriction on making yourself visible, advertising your services. But in India, I know that if you are, then you have to make sure you have the disclaimer that is put on your website right at the beginning, referring to the Bar Council rules, that there is a provision which says that you cannot advertise. Make sure you include that on as a disclaimer, because of course it's a vague area, because of technology, everything becomes very ambiguous. And that's where, technology can affect the identities of the legal service. So you may be tweeting every day about something interesting and you may get noticed. You may have no profile on, you may have no website, but there is that there is always that suspicion that comes up regarding lawyers, but you have to embrace technology. I mean, there is no to it. This is the as you've seen during this pandemic, everyone has gone online now. Everyone is operating mostly on understanding, doing video conferencing and even on virtual courts. So you may not be a first mover, but you are a forced mover. You will be pushed into it.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, which is what happened to me. Just a year ago, I was trying to convince people to work from home as part
yeah
of my own business model, and it was a tough sell. I had to spend a couple of hours per person to say, "Hey, don't quit the law. You can, work from home. I'll help you set up your home-based office." And now I don't have 2 hours of sales to do because everybody is working from home.
yeah.
So anyway, so now one other question is how is technical competency feasible in those areas which have limited internet access?
Yes. Now, feasible, that's a good question, because of course that's something where I mean, there will obviously be areas where you have issues with technology, but at the execution level, yes, at the execution level, you may be facing challenges. But I think there are ways to it. I mean, there are so many apps that have come up on on the phones where you can make yourself, I mean, I will not go into the detail, but you can make yourself more aware of these. There are so many softwares that you can be a part of. From a client perspective, yes, I mean, it would definitely, that area would be, that's where one will need to have some guidance on that. And that there will always be that part where the challenge will come up, and we have to just find ways to overcome it. I mean, we can't keep ourselves ignorant on that. If there is nothing, we have to be more creative. There are more. We have to be more innovative in terms of finding solutions for this. I don't know. I mean, this is something which I feel we will have to strike the right balance. There is that balance required. That I don't know what you feel. I mean, you probably have been dealing with many cases on these issues. What do you
Yeah.
think?
So yeah, I've been enabling folks to even learn, say, Zoom. There are
Yeah.
lawyers. I mean, I don't know for what reason, but lawyers seem to be the last people to catch up with technology. Not the group that's here, obviously not, who's attending this conference, but this webinar. But generally, math and technology. For some reason, we just don't get it. Okay, so we just don't get it. I've been dealing with this, but what I'm trying to say is. We just have to get creative, as you rightly said, right? So the clients have moved on. So it really depends upon what your client base is. So
Yeah.
today you have e-courts, you have courts through video conference. Now I don't know if I'm not a litigator, but I don't know if you can actually not show up because you don't know how to use Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever the local courts are using. So it depends upon. So there is a dearth of the need of the hour where lawyers have to. There has to be a technology for dummies, and as in technology for lawyers, and we have to upskill ourselves on this aspect. Now,
Exactly.
but the question again coming back is, if we don't, is that malpractice? If we don't show up in a court, is it the same as if you don't show up in a physical court? If you
Yeah, I
don't show
mean,
up in a virtual court because your internet connection was down, I mean, I'm thinking there is a comparison here, right? Because if you don't show up in a court because you had an accident or there was a traffic jam, it's the same thing. So if your internet connectivity is low and you don't show up in a virtual court, I'm thinking it's the same to say, there is an analogy here. So every physical activity has a virtual avatar, right?
exactly.
So
Exactly.
so if you're able to figure that out and do the best you can, because at the end of the day, it's all about the client. It's all about client services, and it's a different issue. That one of the surveys that we conducted, most people on the top of the list was lawyers don't update us with what is happening in the courts. So in terms of, so technology can be very, very easy. Like, I had this case, this is my timesheet, and the client gets to see that. That doesn't happen. Because it's not because it's lack of technology, which is why I'm saying this is not about lack of technical competence. This is about lack of not even realizing that that is required for basic competence itself. So as you can see in the Bar Council rules, there's nothing out there. The competence is not defined, and there is only one section there that talks about we have to fearlessly represent our client and do whatever it takes. But that's very loose, right? So we have to get together, and I don't know if this is something which law schools will take up as a project, or if it's bar associations. We'll have to, or maybe right now, as we can see, it's the private players that are taking the lead. To acknowledge that there is an issue and provide solutions so that to ease the process, right?
Absolutely. In fact, here I've noticed in the UK, there is, this question of the litigant. If there's an issue with technology, then there are these legal aid centers where you can approach these centers for providing help, or even citizens advice bureaus. There are these citizen advice bureaus which are very tech savvy, and they have all the internet connections, they have the equipment. So it's like it is like an internet center, but more provided by the state. So that's how here I've noticed that they take care of that from that perspective, that there are these centers which are provided in the remote areas, in the village here and in the districts. There is that provision of service which is provided from, if you don't have technology, or there are issues with technology, then there are these centers which are hubs where you can actually reach out. You can go to them and they can help out with providing that service to them. And I think this is something clearly. And talking about the competence part, yes, I think if there's no internet and you don't turn up, or I don't know if that amounts to negligence or not, but perhaps what those 38 states in the United States have done, or in Canada, or in Singapore, or in Australia also, it is being said that it is almost amounting to negligence, because if you're not competent, then there is malpractice attracting it, because there's a distinction between negligence and being dishonest, and I think that's where the malpractice angle will come in.
So there were a few questions, Anurag, about careers in legal tech, because we have only about a few more minutes left. Priyanka, correct me if I'm wrong. We have 7 minutes. So can you talk a little bit about careers in legal tech? Some students here want to know what is it that they need to be doing, in law school and also beyond.
I think careers in legal tech, I would say, well, there are law schools that are providing now information and even modules, at least in the UK. I know that many law schools here in the UK and even in the United States, even in some other jurisdictions, are providing, and it's open for all across the globe. You can, you can enroll as a foreign lawyer also to understand legal tech. Legal tech career will be, again, I won't say you can, it's up to you. You can either be associated with this more from a research or an academic perspective. And as Rupa, you've said, law schools can be more collaborative hubs. But like the tech incubators are one, that's one area which is developing very rapidly. And I think that's where legal tech as a career can come in. If you have to be familiar with coding, you have to be familiar with the basic aspects of what are the terminologies that are used by a legal technologist or a legal engineer to be able to step in as into this area of legal tech, because there are courses taking place, but you have to be aware, and you have to really learn. So there are, I would say you can keep an eye on. There is a very interesting center called as the Center for Legal Profession of the Harvard Law School, and they provide a lot of information on the legal tech part.
So interestingly, just to give you a background, I was telling you earlier, This was in 1997. I had taken a course in AI and the law in the US, in the JD program that I went to, 1997. AI and the law, where I actually I coded a jury consultant using code, right?
Yeah.
So you have so what I'm trying to say is that was those days, and we still haven't seen any of that now. So I think hopefully we recently had a seminar with, concerning NLS, and hopefully, a lot of discussions have been happening on this aspect as to we need to start at law school. So it's not just about moving, one of the panelists, senior technology lawyer, made a very important point saying it's not just moving classes online, it is beyond that. It is just thinking differently, because there is a digital divide. It has to start with the leadership. It has to start with the Supreme Court. And you had an interesting example about how judges were given laptops, but there was only like one or two who took them and actually used them. This was several years ago. And it's the same even now, right? So it has to start from the top, but otherwise, it has to be a multifaceted approach, I guess. So, yeah.
And it has to be a collaborative approach also. There has to be competence has to be collaborative. It is competence and collaboration that will actually go through. You have to, one has to understand that.
Yeah. And interestingly, there are a lot of lawyers now who I have now come across, because I'm also in the transition mode, who are doing more than just law, or doing, they're not practicing law and they're doing tech work. So in our days, we used to have, as part of our liberal arts education in the law school, we had economics, sociology, along with contracts 101 and torts 101. Right. So now I think it's time to add computer science and coding as one of the core subjects for the liberal arts program, because otherwise it's going to be a different world. It is going to change, and clients are going to change, which means obviously the providers have to change the way we look at things. So great. Any other thoughts from your side, Anurag, before I wrap up and give the mic over back to Priyanka?
Well, I'll just say that there was a question on certification, on how would you certify this in India, and I think that's where I would say the Bar Council has the mandate in terms of collaborating with law schools, with universities, national law schools, and be able to at least have this consultation and provide that level of input and form a group of experts and be able to work on this. So there is definitely, it's not that it's stopping anyone from doing it. There is that fact, and then there can be a certified courses that can be provided by the national law schools or by any deemed university as such, or any other law schools recognized by the Bar Council. So there is a way to it, and definitely, one has to make that effort.
Yeah, I have to say this, but this was one of the dreams of late Dr. Madhav Menon. When he one of the unfinished dreams of getting CLE mainstream. So just wanted to make that point, because when you said that, I just thought of him. Great, Priyanka, this is all yours. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending, and hopefully you've learned, you got some inputs. We've tried to answer as many questions as possible. In case there's anything out there that we couldn't answer and you are still adamant that you want the answer from Anurag, just message Priyanka, and we will. And I'm thinking Anurag, and we will get back to you. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Priyanka, all yours.
Thank you, Anurag. Thank you, Rupa, for taking out the time for doing this. In terms of what Rupa just said, if there are questions, Anurag was gracious enough to share his coordinates. So you could reach out to him. You could write to Manupatra at any point of time. And thank you all who joined us this afternoon. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel and also on our social handles. So thank you and have a good evening. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rupa. Thank you, Priyanka.
Bye, Anurag. Bye, Priyanka.
Bye. Thank you.